the ego of designer comes into picture, and again the reiteration and the efforts needed to modify the design also comes into picture. So generally designer does not like testing. Then the second question is, does the production house want testing? Then here the answer is also no, because see what the production house want is that today the design is ready, tomorrow it has been manufactured, and the third day they want to put it in market, because there is a very stringent time to market and revenue generation period. In today's electronic industry, we do not have much more time to get the revenue back. Once the product it is launched, within 2 years, either it is a microprocessor, it's a microcontroller, or even the cell phone or any electronic gadgets, within 2 years it gets outdated. So if your production is there in your home, at your home for more than for more time period for testing, then you are losing your window for getting revenue back. So here also the production house really do not want the time to be put on testing, and that's why neither designer nor production house, no one wants the testing. But my basic question is, does it generate the trust? A product that you are purchasing from a renowned mobile company, and then the other mobile that you are purchasing from with the same functionalities, I would rather say the more functionalities, from some unknown company, then you are paying a hefty fee or hefty price for mobile from a known company. So there, are you really providing the money for your functionalities? Because in both the mobiles, the functionalities are same. Then for what you are providing, if you are spending more money, that is for trust. And how does the trust is being generated? So does the trust generate reusability? If you trust on a company name, on a brand name, on a logo, then you will reuse it. And if you will reuse, you will repurchase from that company, then really the revenue comes. So does reusability generate the revenue? So here also the answer is yes. So, but from where do the trust come? So the trust comes from the testing. Now, when I say that, so the one way I said that no one, either the user, nor the designer, or neither the production house want the testing, but the testing generates the trust, and trust generates the usability, and reusability generates the revenue. So that's why I can say that even though testing does not directly generate the revenue, but it directly generates the revenue. But sometimes testing can reduce the revenue also, because if you are not testing the product properly, and while testing itself you are losing or you are damaging the product, then you are losing the revenue. The other way, sometimes you are testing so harsh that some of the features which are never going to affect the normal condition of the product, then you are testing it and you are failing it at the manufacturing house itself, and that way also you are reducing the revenue. But that's a very small amount of discussion needed here, because most of the time the testing generates reusability and trust. So the does user or consumer really value the tested product? As I said, yes, there is a small cartoon. If you have iPhone, then naturally you will like to exhibit the iPhone everywhere. Why? Because you want to say that I have a trusted, wealthy product, and that is where the testing comes into picture. Now, the other point of view is that if there is 65% of chips fail at first silicon, we call it respin. And now these respins are costly, because we know that fabricating a chip is really a very, very $1 billion business. And if there is a respin, then you will have to go through the complete cycle again, and then can be a hefty financial loss. And if you want to avoid the respin, which is nowadays very common for 65% of the chips coming in the market, then you will have to put more and more money for the testing. So there are two concepts of testing. Testing reduces the yield, but it increases the reusability. Because if you do not test, you can put all 100 chips that you have fabricated in your market, and you can get money for those 100 chips. But then for next 100 chips that you are fabricating, there will be less reusability, and there testing is a role. So here there are two concepts of imperfect testing. If you have not a proper testing, now what can be the imperfect testing? The one is there if your device is faulty, but if you are not testing it and you are passing it through the test. And the second is you have a good device, but that good device you are failing in test itself, and then it appears as a faulty device. So there in both the cases, either it's a increase defect level where the faulty devices are being appearing as a good device. There you are losing the revenue, you are losing the brand name. And if you are putting a good device as a failed device, then you are reducing the yield. So is again I am saying a bug-free design does not give any extra revenue, because the revenues we are getting based on functionality, but bugs in design are definitely very costly. So there are many I will say many examples there, and the most famous is Pentium bug. So Intel Pentium chip, they released it in 1994, and then there was a professor in Switzerland claimed that there is a bug while for floating point division that chip was not giving the proper answer. And even that floating point division was very in some particular cases only that floating point division was not giving the right answer. So in that case, Intel had to replace all those Pentium chips wherever it was. So everywhere they have to give the replacement, and then it cost nearly $475 million loss to Intel. So this is a very famous example. There are other famous examples also. So if you just Google search for the failure of verification and testing, you in a VLSI design, you will get a lot many examples where sometimes it cost money, sometimes it cost human loss, and sometimes it cost the revenue and brand name as well. Basically, when we say testing is of that much importance, why people do not like testing, particularly designers and production house does not like testing. So here I have gone through a little philosophy that can you prove the lion exists? Yes, you show me a lion, see, madam, this is a lion, and I will agree that yes, the lion exists. But when if I say, can you prove that ghost does not exist? See, to prove that ghost does not exist, it's very difficult. You cannot prove even ghost exists, or you cannot prove even the ghost does not exist. And even to prove that the ghost does not exist is very difficult. So similar way to prove that the bug does not exist is very difficult. So you have gone through months of the efforts for your design, and then you are not finding any bug, you will say that okay, it seems that this design has no bug as per my experience, but you will not certify that this design is bug free. You will say that I have not found the bugs. And this is the reason that key verification and testing is a never complete exercise. And that is the reason that no one or no one love basically testing. So very famous scientist Digikestra has given this quote that testing can only show the presence of error, never their absence. Now coming to again VLSI design testing. So see this graph which is up to 2012, and I should have extended it up to 2021, but this graph now the lower the upper yellow line shows the manufacturing cost. So silicon manufacturing cost, if you see from 1982 to 2012, within this 2 decades, it has 3 decades, it has gone drastically down. It has reduced like anything. But at the same time, if you see the testing cost seems to be very constant. Now, it does mean that nowadays, when we are in 2021, when both the lines have crossed, that yellow line has gone still down, but red line is still at the constant level. In today's scenario, where we are talking about silicon and semiconductor devices and integrated circuits and VLSI chips, overall, if we see that the manufacturing cost of a transistor is very less compared to the testing cost of a transistor, because these lines are now crossed. So when I'm saying that the testing of a transistor is much more costly than on the manufacturing of the transistor directly says that if I do not test my device and put it in market, naturally it will be very, very less costly compared to the other competitor who is properly testing it. And that's happened in today's scenario. Sometimes some products from some country or some manufacturing house are very, very, I would say very, very cheap compared to the good companies. But so maybe some other reasons I am seeing that maybe the country policies, maybe the labor rate or everything else. But the major reason I am seeing here is the testing cost. And this testing cost changes the complete game. Moving ahead with this, if I am saying that the trade line shows the testing cost per transistor and it remains constant, while the yellow line, which is the manufacturing cost, and it goes down, does it mean that oh भाई मैन्युफैक्चरिंग लोगों ने तो बहुत रिसर्च किया और बहुत अच्छा काम किया और कॉस्ट को बहुत कम कर दिया, but this testing people who are presented here with this red line are just sitting idle and doing nothing, and that cost remains constant. So if this is the conclusion, that is the completely wrong conclusion, because see, when your density goes up, as the silicon cost goes down, the number of transistors in a chip goes very, very high compared to your peripheral pins. Now, if I'm talking about the ratio of number of transistors and number of pin in a particular IC, it is drastically increasing. So nowadays, earlier, suppose I have IC with 100 transistors and I have 10 pins, peripheral pins, input, output. Now that ratio has gone to thousands and billions. So their number of transistors per pin, which I need to assess to check that each of the transistors is working fine or not, becoming very, very, very complex. And in that case, if no particular research has been gone, then the red line, which is right now looking constant, would have gone up. So the way yellow line goes down, with the same proportion, red line would have gone up. But because of the very extensive research in this VLSI design and VLSI testing field, scientists could keep this red line at least constant. So this is what the scenario is. But now you are clearly aware that why testing is of much more importance in today's VLSI design area. So just reinforcing my argument, let me give you some numbers, some facts here that in the era of multi-million gate ASICs, reusable IPs and SoC design, 70% of the total efforts consumed by verification and testing. So whatever human resources you are using, whatever human hours you are using, 70% of the human hours and human resources are being used for just verification and testing of a design, which designing takes nearly 30%. Similarly, if you go talk about the number of engineers, so there are three times the verification, validation, and testing engineers compared to RTL design engineers overall globally. I'm talking about. And when your design project is complete, if you go through the coding volume, so your code volume, in total code volume, 80% of the code volume is for test benches and test cases and ATPGs and all these things. So this is how it clears that most of the jobs and why most of the job openings in India and other fields are in this particular verification, validation, and testing scenario. Now, so by now I could establish that why there should be testing and verification. Now I am moving with when to test. So I would say that when to test, the only answer as soon as possible, because whenever there is a small bug, you can just step on it and you can kill it. But if that bug grows, then you will need more sharp objects, more sharp weapons to kill him. So here now, so when can bug happen? A bug can be introduced in your design. So I would say that every step that you are taking forward in a complete VLSI design flow, every step may introduce some bugs. So I think as I have gone through there, you have gone through VLSI design steps, starting with your requirement and specification, and then behavioral coding, and then RTL coding. Then from RTL coding, you have gate level. From gate level, you have transistor level, and transistor level, you go through layout, and then you have a fabrication manufacturing steps, and then you have packaging, and then you put them IC in the market. So if these are the steps, every step you need a check, and that check we call as a test. So this is what, now the one more thing is a very famous rule of 10. So suppose a big bug has happened at your concept level, concept level you are not catching it, and it goes at a design level, and your design has been design has been developed, and now that bug is being caught, then it will cost you 10 times more compared to your earlier. So every step your bug goes unintended, unnoticed, then it costs you 10 times more if it is being caught at the next step. So this is very famous rule of 10. Now the number of bugs found and cost of finding bugs. So the module level, chip level, system level, and at customer level, the number of bugs being found are very, very less, because in very initial stage there will be more number of bugs you will be catching, and then it goes down. But when it goes down, the catching that bug, cost of getting a bug at a next step goes drastically high. So this is very famous rule of 10. It costs 10 times more to test a device as we move a higher level in the product manufacturing process. Now this next question is, from where do bugs comes? So bugs comes generally from design errors, fabrication defects, and physical failure. Design errors are because you have misinterpreted the specification. You wanted a multiplier and you designed a divider. So then no one can test and verify unless and until it really goes to the application. So that is the design error. Fabrication error is your wrong component and incorrect wiring. Fabrication defects are imperfect process variation, because we know that there are so many process parameters are there, like dosing, timing, pressure, and temperature, and all these things if are not proper, then you may have some fabrication defects. And then the next is physical failure. Physical failure is once your device is there in a system, and during the lifetime of a system, because of wear and tear, the device fails. So these are the four possible classifications of introduction of bugs. Now here we have given the level of testing. So your testing can be at architectural level, behavioral level, RTL level, gate level, transistor level, physical level, and then the final chip level. Again, if you are working at a circuit or system on chip, network on chip, prototype testing or mass production testing, or even your system is at field. So if these are the design steps, each and every step, as I said earlier, requires the testing. Now I will be talking about role of testing in general. Just 1 minute. A very generic term we are using, testing. But when we talk about the ASIC design flow, chip design flow, there are variety of roles the testing is playing, and every time it is answering the different question. So let's understand the various words being used for testing and how the words are different. So verification will answer that will any fault occur. So you have a RTL level design, behavioral level design, you have behavioral code or RTL code, and then you are checking that RTL code or behavioral code using the test benches, using the system Verilog language or any other language. You can even use Verilog itself, EHDL itself for writing test bench, and you are checking it either. So what basically you want to check? If I want adder, have I written the code for adder properly, or there will be any fault in later after the fabrication? So you don't want the wrong designed to go to fabrication, and that's why you are checking. So will any fault occur? Okay. The next is validation. So here you have verified the code in your GDS2 file is ready and it has gone to fabrication. But once your GDS2 file is ready and it is going to for fabrication, and if you want billion ICs, naturally no fab will directly produce the billion IC, and not even you as a designer would like to go with it. So what will be the general procedure? There will be, before mass production start, there will be a sort prototype production. And then let's say a simple small lot of prototype production, you would go a very, very exhaustive testing. So this is called validation on a small number of ICs. So first lot of 10 or 100 ICs, which is being fabricated, you will go with all AC, DC, parametric delay, and all kind of power analysis, and you will say that, okay, my ICs are now fine. And then once it passes through validation, understand that the validation will be very, very exhaustive. But it guarantees you that once the mass production will start, most of the ICs will be fine. So that is the second role of testing, which we call validation. The third is detection. So if you are satisfied with validation, which was very, very exhaustive process, and you have cleared that, okay, now this particular design can go for mass production, and then every minute number of ICs are being fabricated. Each IC that is being fabricated before shipment must be tested. That we call as a detection. So detection is only go, no go kind of check. It will only answer that either this particular IC is to be shipped or not, yes or no. And here this detection should be a very, very small in terms of time and efforts, because see, now you just want answer yes, no, and it is for billions of IC every moment, every second being fabricated and being going on the conveyor belt, and it should be passed to the shipment. So here it should be very, very, I would say very, very fast and very, very small in time, but at the same time it should have very, very high fault coverage. So here, how you designing your test plan, I mean, how you are planning the detection is of very crucial, because at a minimum time, you want the maximum fault to be covered. Now, the next is diagnosis. So what is the role of diagnosis? Diagnosis is when either you are not satisfied with validation. In your first lot of IC, during validation, you see that, okay, I'm not getting the proper satisfactory results, then you go with diagnosis. Or if you have gone through mass production and one fine morning you see that out of 100, now your 80 ICs are being failed all of a sudden. So what happened? So this kind of questions when arises, you will go through diagnosis. Otherwise, in normal situation, if you are satisfied with validation and your yield is very okay in mass production, then you will not go with diagnosis. So if you are going through diagnosis, it will answer that where is the fault. So in a big IC, you will able to say that where is the specific fault. Now to say, once you are aware that okay, the specific fault is here, the second round will be device characterization. You would like to ask that why that fault occurred. Was the design itself wrong, or the test process was wrong? Once you are aware that whatever is the reason of fault, you would like to check how the fault can be prevented. Now here one thing is that suppose if I go with human body and our human cycle, if we have any problem, like I said that after detection we go through diagnosis. So that is the same the way human being goes with diagnosis checkup, and you find out where is the fault, and then you say that why that fault occur. But in most of the time in our own medical science, we try to recover from that particular disease, but that is not case with the silicone ICs. So most of the times where the silicone ICs are found with faults, they are supposed to be thrown away. But then why you want to have the how that fault can be prevented? Because if you are aware that how that fault occurred, you will be able to prevent the same kind of fault in the next load. So that is the failure mode analysis. Now, burn-in is the next testing role, which says that will it work for longer life. So when many of you may have worked in production houses, you may knowing that whenever the product is being fabricated, it is being put in some harsh environment, just to make sure that once it is out in market and it is in field, it does not die away very soon. So here also in burn-in, the IC is put for 7 to 8 hours continuously in a little higher temperature and higher voltage range. So there, if the IC survives, then it is being shipped. Now, very, I will say, interesting role comes now is the speed binning. Now, I would like to take a pause here and would like to ask the audience a little, because I am talking from long. Let's break the monotony. So, anyone would like to say something about speed binning? Hasmukh sir, I am audible, na?
Yes, madam.
Okay, okay.
Uh,
So, would anyone like to say something about speed binning?
yes, one of the participant. Yes, you can directly mute and ask or reply.
Okay.
Dear participant, those who have any questions or any want to reply, you can directly mute your mic and you can reply.
I think someone, Mr. Dilip wants to say something. Mr. Dilip, do you want to say something? You have raised your hand. Okay. If
No,
no one
madam.
is there,
Continue.
so
Yes.
I will continue. So is it visible now? I think. Is it
Yes,
visible
madam.
in slideshow mode?
No, no, not in slideshow mode, madam.
Okay, okay. I think I did the same mistake. So now I think okay. So now is it okay?
Yes,
Yes,
madam.
ma'am.
Okay. See, now discussing about the speed binning, this is very interesting role of testing. As we know that there are, depending upon the PMOS and NMOS, if I'm talking specifically about the PMOS and NMOS, in a CMOS circuit, it can be, when the PMOS and NMOS are being fabricated, depending upon the process parameters, PMOS and NMOS both can be either fast type, or one can be of slow type and other can be of fast type. So you may have heard about the process corners like fast, fast, slow, slow, fast, slow, slow, fast, and typical, typical. I hope this is known to many of you. Are you people aware with this, no? So when generally the CMOS is being designed, the CMOS IC is being designed, people are thinking about a specific speed of PMOS and NMOS that we call typical. So suppose I am designing my IC for 1 gigahertz. Okay, so I have designed my in CMOS IC I have designed my NMOS and PMOS with a layout which gives me 1 gigahertz speed in general. But it may happen that while being fabrication, some of the ICs will be fabricating which works at a 1 gigahertz, and some ICs may be fabricated such that in that both the PMOS and NMOS are slower compared to requirement. And then in that case, my IC may not work at 1 gigahertz, but definitely it gives me the good results at 0.8 gigahertz. So now those ICs which were intended to work at 1 gigahertz but are not working at 1 gigahertz but working fine at 0.8 gigahertz, should I throw it? Should the fabrication house would like to throw it? Naturally no, because if they are throwing it, they are having the very high financial loss, and then the ICs which are survived at 1 gigahertz will be very costly. So here what generally they do, they give a different name or a different version of that particular ICs, and put in specification itself they put a slower speed, and they sell it at a very comparatively lower price. So this is the role of speed binning. Once the IC is fabricated for a specific speed, but not all the ICs can run at the same speed, and they bin the ICs based on different speed, and then it can be sold at a different price. So that is the role of speed binning. The next is acceptance testing. Here, the acceptance testing is at the customer side. The customer will check or test the IC before putting it in system. So this is something while we are designing a board, each IC before we are putting it on the board, we like to test and then we put it on the board. So this is what the acceptance testing or incoming inspection. So I would like to have a small break here of 1 minute, 1 or 2 minutes, and then I will continue. Meanwhile, if anyone has any question, please feel free to ask. Hello? Hello? I'm waiting for any question. Let's go ahead. So there are the slides related to verification, validation, diagnosis, device characterization, failure mode analysis, detection, burn-in, and acceptance testing, which I have already covered. Here the elaboration is given. But I will share these slides with you all. So later on, if you wish, you can go through it.
One of the questions from in a chat box from Mr. Satish, increasing in frequency, but I'm not getting what he want to ask. How testing can be done? Increasing in frequency, how testing can be done? That is the questions from Mr. Satish.
Let me answer, Mr. Satish. If I understand your question is, you want to ask that which is the maximum frequency that circuit can work, that we how to find it out. Is this the proper way? Because I'm not able. Let me go through the team view. Okay. So have I understood your question properly?
In MEMS technology, he is asking in a MEMS technology, MEMS. Can you, Satish, can you unmute your mic and directly you can converse your question with madam?
Exactly, sir. MEMS is right now not this topic because it is a totally different way you are testing the frequency in MEMS, and that's a completely out of the track here. Right now, my discussion is because this is a VLSI testing only. I'm focusing on CMOS technology right now. Off the track, we can discuss sometimes. Okay with that?
Mr. Satish, can you unmute your mic and if you have any question?
Meanwhile, let me thank Dr. Suresh Kumar V for praising. He is saying the excellent start of the session. So I'm thankful to him for appreciating my efforts. Thank you, sir. Okay, Hasmukh sir, I will talk to Mr. Satish later on because he is talking something on MEMS and which is correct right now.
Yes.
Yes.
And so we have to use different software for different verification, like diagnosis, like fault validation.
Definitely. See, whichever is there for CMOS cannot be for QCA and cannot be for MEMS because every particular device technology will behave differently. Their characteristic is different, and you cannot have the same verification or validation testing tools for. One of my student, Professor Vaishali Dhare, worked on QCA testing. So there we developed a complete set of EDA tools for QCA testing because whichever tools available in market today, they are very much mature for CMOS technology. But the same tools cannot be used for QCA technology. So what basically our approach is, we took the CMOS tools and then we put some add-ons on that. We put some plugins and then we used the CMOS tools in a QCA design and testing. So that way you will have to either you will have to modify the existing tools which are very much matured for CMOS, or you will have to use the separate tool set itself. So whatever is good for CMOS and matured for CMOS cannot be used for MEMS.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so now I should go back to my presentation. Okay, thank you. What we were talking about the design test flow. See, now you are very well aware with the ASIC design flow and the fonts in black font, that is a VLSI design flow. And in the red font, it is written what kind of checking or what kind of confirmation you will be doing at that particular step. So if you are writing a specification, what you do is a finalization of specification. You would like to check and confirm the specification. So that is also a part of verification. At behavioral description or RTL code, you will be doing test bench writing in VHDL, Verilog, system Verilog, and that is your functional verification. At gate level netlist, you would be doing static timing analysis. So here you talk about setup and hold time violation, critical path, maximum frequency, and you talk about the gate delays and gate delays. So that is static timing analysis. Now, once you are at a circuit level, so in static timing analysis, many of the times you talk about the gate delays. Now, when you are circuit level, you have the net delays also, because now your interconnects are also there which having R and C components, and because of that there is a delay. So at circuit level, there will be a second round of static timing analysis, which is now having gate delay as well as net delay also. Now, once you move ahead at the physical level, you have drawn the layout, and your physical domain level, you will check your layout versus schematic, which we call LVS check. So here you want to confirm that whatever was your schematic, schematic drawing, now it is exactly same with your layout. Your layout is matching as per your schematic. So that was LVS. So that is also part of verification testing. During fabrication, you take wafer testing. That is there. Once your pilot load production is there, as I said, at the first load, it can be a 10 to 100 ICs that is pilot load. You will go with validation. Once you are there in mass production, you will go with testing, burn-in, and speed binning. All of a sudden, if you have yield loss, many of the ICs are being failed. You will go with diagnosis and failure mode analysis. And once the IC reaches to user, there is a acceptance or incoming testing. And then when IC is in use, we call it a built-in self-test. So in system, there will be built-in self-test will be there. So these are the different level where the device or IC is being tested. Now discussion about verification and testing. So these two words are nowadays very, very hit in industry. People are talking so much about verification and testing. So let me clearly discriminate between these two terms. So here when we are saying verification and testing, basically we are saying verification and detection. So verification is before you go to fabrication. So I will say that is a pre-silicon era. Whatever you do with your laptop or with your desktop, you are writing a verification, you are writing a RTL code, you are writing it in Verilog, HDL. Then you are doing RTL level design, you have schematic, you have GDS2 file, but everything is still at a conceptual level. Nothing exit silicon is nothing in picture. So whatever you do before pre-silicon, everything we call is as a verification. But once you have taken the silicon in your hand and you have started manufacturing, and then whatever you do to confirm your production is right, it is post-silicon, and that is testing. Now, pre-silicon is one time. Why I am saying, suppose I am today developing a microprocessor. So that's a microprocessor design I am developing, and that's why I will be doing verification one time only, one time on RTL, one time on transistor level, one time on GDS2. But once it is verification is done, I can fabricate 1 billion such microprocessor, and all those 1 billion microprocessor I will be doing a detection test. So it is this verification is one time and detection is every time. So it's own ICs which are being fabricated. Now the methods of verifications are simulation, emulation, and some formal methods. And in detection testing, I think test generation and test application is there. Verification will find out a design bug, while the detection will find out a fabrication defect. Now, see, understand that thing. Wherever any fault in design, that will be caught by verification. But once it is going to fabrication, the fabrication people assumes that your GDS2 file is a golden file. There is no design problem. So if you wanted an multiplier and by mistake you have given a GDS2 file of divider to the fabrication people, they will not take it with a multiplier. They will see that okay, you had a GDS2 file of divider and we have fabricated it as the divider only. So they are not following your specifications, but they are following your GDS2 file as a golden reference. So this is the difference between verification and testing. Now, if there is a design bug which is not caught in verification, all the ICs that are being fabricated will be useless. But if there is a fabrication defect, it may be in some of the ICs or it may be many of the ICs, but it depends upon in which particular load that fabrication defect has occurred. So not necessarily that a fabrication defect can be present in all the ICs being fabricated. It depends on load to load, and sometimes it may be permanent, but many of the times it may be in a specific loads only. So this is the basic difference between verification and testing. I'm taking a pause now because now we are going in a little advanced work. So here, wherever I will complete a slide, I will take just 1 minute pause if there is any question. And as I am in a full screen mode, I am not able to see your questions directly in a chat box. So please unmute yourself and ask directly.
So again, Mr. Satish is writing, okay, madam, it's for CMOS fine. So can you, Satish, can you unmute your mic and ask directly to madam?
Yes, sir.
Yes, 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 sir.
Sir, how the testability can be done in MEMS technologies? For that only I'm asking, sir. You know, advancement in VLSI, no.
So
Pardon, sir?
How the testing can be done in MEMS, ma'am, in terms of MEMS for these technologies and all, how the testing in CMOS we used to do the BIST and so on testings and all, no, ma'am.
Sir, MEMS generally goes something like analog. It goes on, see, there is two different things. There is a digital design. There are clear-cut rules. We have equations and all this, so we can deal with it. But when it goes in an analog kind of structure, the testing rules which we are applying here cannot directly will be there. And MEMS testing is purely ad hoc. Why?
Ad hoc.
CMOS testing, and particularly in digital domain, whatever testing we are doing, that is very, very structured. So,
Okay,
see, suppose the MEMS, if you are talking about microprocessor or microcontroller or any other digital circuitry, they have a specific rule sets of design, which is not there in analog. Analog individual particular application is different in its nature, and we need to test them. So whatever ATPG or DFT or scan architecture, with whatever we are talking about, CMOS testing cannot be directly applied to MEMS technology. So again, I am saying that MEMS testing is totally a different domain, which is off track right now. So our today's point, within 1 hour, now I want to cover DFT, which is not be directly targeting to MEMS. It requires complete, in 2 hours, I need to start completely from the scratch for MEMS technology. All of a sudden, now I cannot jump to MEMS testing.
Okay. I'm asking for it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is time to market and time to money, where we have verification, validation, and testing. So I think we have covered this. Now the next question is how to test. Now I will be focusing, as I said just now, I will be focusing on digital circuit testing. So if I'm talking about digital circuit testing, it's very, very simple how to test. You apply the specific inputs. So if you have a digital circuit with A, B, C, D, E, you know that there will be input patterns all 0, 0, 0 and 0, 0, 0, 1 and 0, 0, 0, 1, 1 and so on. So if you have n number of inputs, then the possible number of input patterns are 2 raised to n. So I think that's very clear. And if you want to test a AND gate, which is of 2 inputs, then 4 patterns you will have to apply. 2 raised to n means 2 raised to 2, 4 patterns. Now, for each input pattern, you will have an output response. And that output response, you will have to compare it with the golden response. Now, that golden response is maybe stored somewhere, or you are calculating, or it is there in your mind itself. So this is what, and if you are getting all the 2 raised to n results, all 2 raised to n actual responses are same as the golden responses, you declare the IC as a पास IC. तो ये तो बहुत ही सिंपल हो गया. जैसे हम एंड गेट चेक करते हैं. If I want to check AND gate, I apply 0, 0, and if I am getting 0, which is the actual output, and the golden output is also 0. And similarly, I go on with 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1. And if I am getting the matching outputs for all 4 combinations, I say my AND gate is working. So if this is the thing, then I need not to have this discussion at all. मुझे कोई expert lecture के लिए भी नहीं बुलाता और ये discussion भी नहीं होता. So if this is so simple, then let's check. तो मेरा syllabus तो over हो गया. अब मुझे आगे कुछ बोलना ही नहीं है. Now let's check. calculate the time required to test a 64-bit adder at the speed of 1 gigahertz. Now I want answer from everyone in chat box. Please try कीजिए. At least few of you. See, let me repeat my question again. Calculate the time required to test a 64-bit adder at a speed of 1 gigahertz. How will you calculate it? If there is a 64-bit adder, how many inputs are there?
128.
Okay, you are very near, but if it is 128, I would say 129. So
yes, 128 plus 1. Yeah.
129 inputs. 129 inputs. Then how many combinations will be there?
2 rest.
2 to 129 input combination.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if one combination at a speed of 1 gigahertz, what will be the time to check 2 raised to 129 combination? Mr. Appar, 63 milliseconds are not the right answer. Two raised to 129 combinations at a speed of 1 gigahertz.
It's a very huge value, madam. It's very 10 raised to power of 10 raised to power of 22. Very huge.
Okay, so these are the seconds.
Yeah.
So now if you will, I hope many of you are getting the similar kind of answer. Yeah, so it's very huge. Let me go back to my slide. So it's nearly something 1.2 by 10 raised to 22 years.
Yes.
10 raised to 22 years.
Yes.
Now it does mean that your adder is in real meaning is not at all testable the way you are testing your AND gate. 2 इनपुट एंड गेट जो आप टेस्ट करते हो 4 कॉम्बिनेशन के साथ, वही फिलोसॉफी अगर आप 64 बिट एडर पे अप्लाई करते हो, तो then it is never going to be tested in your life, not even in your generations of life. And that's why to have the very efficient testing methodology is required. Yes or no? And even 64-bit adder is nowadays not a big deal, because we now our processors are much more than 64, and it's not having only adder. Beyond ALU, there is so many other things as well. So I want to say that, and again one more thing I want to draw your attention here. When I am saying at a speed of 1 gigahertz, see which are the tasks to be done. First of all, you will have to generate the input pattern. Suppose I want to apply 0, 0, 0, 0, all zeros. I will have to generate all zeros. I will have to transfer it to my device, the IC. Then the IC will work at its predefined speed. It will generate the output. I will have to collect that output, that response. Then I will have to compare it with my golden output, which is stored somewhere. So I will have to first read that golden output, and I will have to compare it with the golden output, and then I will have to declare yes. So all those tasks should be done within the time frame of one cycle of 1 gigahertz. So how many tasks I am doing? Input generation, input apply to the IC, collecting the output, comparing the output, and finalizing the result. So if I am giving all these tasks a similar time, then I think that each task itself is 5 gigahertz worth. So that is what the impossibility in testing. And that's why we need to have a very efficient testing methodology. So going ahead with this, there are two kinds of testing, functional testing and structural testing. So functional testing is like, suppose you have an adder, you go like you are doing in a test bench verification. If you have an adder, you apply one by one all possible combination and check that whether it is adding properly or not. So you are focusing on function. But the other is the structural testing. In structural testing, you don't go with the function of that particular design, but you check that each component of that design is working properly or not. Like we have a project and we have fabricated a circuit board. Now we can check that circuit board in two different ways. I can apply all the inputs, possible inputs through that circuit board and check one by one output. कि भाई मैंने ये इनपुट दिया तो ये मेरा सर्किट बोर्ड मैंने ये स्पेसिफिक वर्क के लिए बनाया है तो either it is working or not. So all possible inputs and possible outputs I am checking. Right now I am not worried about the internal components. If my all inputs are giving me proper outputs, then I assume that the all internal structure of the circuit is working fine. So that is one approach of testing. The other approach of testing is I don't focus on individual inputs and individual outputs. I check one by one each interconnect and each component. कि ये IC ठीक है, ये ट्रांजिस्टर ठीक है, ये डायोड ठीक है, सबके कनेक्शंस ठीक है. तो नेचुरली मेरी IC जो मेरा डिजाइन ठीक था तो ये IC जो मैंने सर्किट जो फैब्रिकेट की है that's going to be work fine. So this is the second approach of structural testing. So these two approaches we are using in a different way. Functional approach we are using while we are writing test bench in Verilog or system Verilog, and structural approach we are using once the IC is fabricated and we do a detection testing. So now if I am focusing once the IC is done, because I want to cover design for test, I am talking about design for test, it does mean that I am more worried about the IC after fabrication. So if IC has been fabricated, then what kind of faults there be in nets in a digital circuit? So in my digital circuits, there are nets and gates, interconnects and gates. Now what can happen to gates? The transistor can be open or short. And faults on nets can be either the nets are open or nets can be short to ground or power supply or any other net. So if net is sorted to ground, I will say it is stuck at 0 fault. And if net is sorted to VDD, I will say it is stuck at 1. And if it is sorted to any other net, then I will say it's the breach fault. So this is basically the possible faults a net can have. Stuck at 0, stuck at 1, and breach fault. Now, when I am saying so I am modeling those faults as the stuck at faults. Then there can be multiple stuck at faults and single stuck at faults. So naturally, if I have n nets, then all nets can be faulty altogether, or at a time only one net can have one fault only. So all NPR combinations, NCR combinations are possible. But if I discuss about a single stuck at fault, if I assume that at a time I can have only one fault, it will cover majority of the faults, majority of the multiple stuck at faults. And that's how single stuck at fault has been more classical faults or more legacy fault model. So either you talk about the computers at the time of walls, or the computers and processors in today's scenario when it is being fabricated with billions of transistors. This single stuck at fault modeling is classical fault modeling, and it is being adopted everywhere. So these examples we had seen that if I go with functional testing, it will require 2 raised to 15 into 10 raised to 22 years. But if I go with structural testing, so here in structural testing, if you look at this, so this is a 1-bit adder, and similar 64-bit adders will be there. And this is 1-bit, 1-bit carry, and similarly there 64 such replicas can be there. So if I am looking at this, there are nets with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I apply all the algorithms of fault equivalence and single stacked fault theories, which I cannot go in detail right now, I can say that each slice will be having 27 faults. So this is one slice of carry and some output. So this I am talking about one slice, and there are 27 faults. So if I now consider 64 into 27 faults, so it has become 1728 faults now. And if I test this 1728 faults at the rate of 1 gigahertz, then I can complete it within 0.00001728 seconds. So this is how, by moving from functional testing to structural testing, I am using single stacked fault theorem. I can convert this many years into this many nanoseconds. So this is how the concepts of single stacked faults and fault equivalence and ATPG and DFT comes into picture. So test vectors, how to generate the test vectors? You can have exhaustive, pseudo-exhaustive, random, pseudo-random, weighted random, and deterministic. And fault models, you can have single stacked faults, bridge fault, transistor open and short faults, and many more. Now let me explain these words here. When I am saying test vector is a one particular set of inputs. Suppose I have A, B, C, D. And if I apply A is equal to 1, B is equal to 1, C is equal to 1, and D is equal to 1, then it itself is a test vector. So A, B, C, D, 1, 1, 1, 1. So it becomes one test vector. Now, suppose I have n inputs, then naturally, in exhaustive way, it can be 2 raised to n possible test vectors. So this is which we call exhaustive generation of test vectors. Now, in pseudo-exhaustive test vectors, if I can divide my circuit into sub-circuits, so suppose, let me have a look. So I have put, no. So I have not gone in depth of this pseudo-exhaustive considering the 2 hours time limit. So in pseudo-exhaustive test circuit, suppose I can divide my circuit into sub-circuits, and then for each individual sub-circuit, I go with exhaustive test generation. Then it will be naturally less than the overall exhaustive test generation requirement. So this is called pseudo-exhaustive test generation. Now in random test generation, I will not go all 2 raised to n, but randomly I will select some of the test vector and I will check the circuit. So that is random. Now what is pseudo-random? So naturally when we are on a hardware domain, there is nothing random because even our LFSR will not generate the random test vectors. We know that what is going to be generated by random generation of LFSR. So that is not a pure random, so we call it pseudo-random because we have applied some polynomial, some degree of knowledge. So that is not a natural case of random generation. So whatever generation of test vector we are doing by LFSR or cellular automata or anything, that is called pseudo-random. Then the weighted random. So suppose I am generating all the inputs with 1 or zeros with equal probability, then it is random. But if I am giving some particular either 1 or 0, a higher probabilistic approach, then it is weighted random generation. Deterministic. Rather than any random, I specifically for a given fault, I'm saying that this is the fault, and if you want to detect this fault, you will require this particular set of inputs. That is a deterministic test pattern generation. Now, as we have already talked about single stacked faults, whether your net is connected to ground or one, so this is called single stacked 1 and stacked 0. The second is bridge fault. So your net is not connected to, neither connected to 1 or nor connected to 0, but it is sorted to some other signal itself. So that sort is called bridge fault. And in gate, it can be transistor open or transistor sort fault. So there are many more fault models you can go through. But these are the basic fault models I have listed here. I would like to have a sip of water. Just go through this slide here. I have noted down here. So thank you. Welcome back. I have noted down two different terms here: automatic test pattern generation and fault simulation. I think this automatic test pattern generation, ATPG, is a very highly discussed word, and many of you may have heard about something. So, will anyone like to say something about ATPG? How many of you have explored ATPGs somewhere, somehow? Anyone who have used ATPG in any work? Okay. Yeah. So then let me start with. See, there are two approaches you can have. First of all, you will have to decide that which are the faults that you want to check. So in your circuit you will have to first list down. See, by this is my transistor level circuit. Suppose I am taking the same example here. So I have a circuit here, and in this circuit I want to check this fault, this fault, this fault, and list down. So suppose I have here, as seen in this picture, I have listed down the 17 faults. So now for 17 faults, I will have to find out that which are the test vectors that will address this 17 faults. So for individual fault, there can be a test vector which addresses that fault and gives me. Suppose if I am applying ABC here, 1, 1, 1, then in case of this stacked 0 fault, my output should be, if I am applying ABC 1, 1, 1, then naturally my sum should be 1. But if there is a stacked 0 fault, somehow rather than 1, it can be 0 here. So that is what basically you want to have. So if I write down what you want basically is a fault, and corresponding to that fault you want a test vector, and then corresponding to test vector you want golden output, and golden output and faulty output, both you want. Okay, so this is how your automatic test pattern generation goes on. So what will be the approach here? You can have two things. You can take any test vector and see that how many faults out of those test vector could be covered. कि भाई मेरे पास 100 फॉल्ट्स का लिस्ट है, मैंने रेंडमली कोई एक टेस्ट वेक्टर उठाया 11111, so this 1111 faults, how many test vector, how many faults it covers? So that is fault simulation. Okay, I am picking up a random test vector and checking that how many faults from the given list are detected by this vector. फिर मैं दूसरा रैंडम टेस्ट वेक्टर लूंगी और बाकी बचे फॉल्ट्स में से कितने फॉल्ट्स कवर करते हैं, एंड आई गो ऑन अनलेस एंड until my fault list is empty. I hope I am clear in fault simulation. I have 100 faults in my fault list, and because I have n inputs, I have 2 raised to n possible test vectors in my test vector list. So I have two lists. One is all possible 2 raised to n test vector, and I have about 100 faults. Naturally, I don't want to apply 2 raised to n possible test vectors. Otherwise, वो मुझे 10 raised to 22 years लगेंगे. So I want to decide that out of these 2 raised to n possible test vectors, which are the vectors I need to apply to the circuit. So how to decide that vectors? So first approach is I randomly select a vector, and I see that out of given 100 vector, 100 faults, which faults are being detected by this given vector. तो वो मैं tick कर दूंगी. I will pick up the next vector, and from the rest of the faults, I will pick I will take other faults which are being covered by the second vector. And I will keep on taking adding random vectors unless and until all the faults in my list are ticked and my fault list is empty. So that is the approach called fault simulation. Now in deterministic test pattern generation, the approach is totally different. Here I will pick up a fault, and I will check that out of given 2 raised to n possible vectors, which vector is detecting that fault. Now I will take the next vector, next fault and next vector, third fault and any one more vector. So that on I will pick up a fault and corresponding test vector. Bilkul opposite process compared to fault simulation. So that is deterministic test pattern generation. Now, which one is better? See, I have deterministic test pattern generator and I have fault simulation. In deterministic, मैं fault लेती हूँ और उसके corresponding vector search करती हूँ. यहाँ पे मैं vector लेती हूँ और उसके corresponding faults लेती हूँ. In both the process, what I want, a very small number of test vector which covers entire fault list. But would anyone like to comment that which process is better? Which process can be better?
ATPG.
How Mr. Deterministic test pattern will be better? Any guess? Okay, Mr. Apparao is saying random test vector. Mr. Pankaj is saying deterministic test vector. See, both have their own, I will say, benefits and disadvantages. But I have taken one example here, and it's a very interesting example. Tell me if आप army में हो, if you are at a war front, and in front of you there are thousands of enemy soldiers, how will you kill them? Will you use your machine gun and just you will kill many randomly, or if you will kill them one by one, taking the specific shooting them with a specific निशान लेके उसको मारोगे?
In bundles.
Okay, Because you see, when you have large number of faults in front of you, you take a random vector. Or random vector is definitely going to address so many of the faults together. तो अगर आप डिटर्मिनिस्टिक करते हो तो आपके पास 100 फॉल्ट्स है तो आपको 100 बार वो प्रोसेस करनी है. But if you are doing random in first few slot, so if you take a randomly test vector, out of 100 पहले वो 40 को निकाल देगा. दूसरा ले लिया और more 20, third more 10, so 70 are covered within 3 random test vector. Now the rest are such faults which are pseudo random pattern resistive. वो ऐसे हैं कि random pattern से वो cover नहीं होंगे. Then you do the reverse process. Then you take the fault one by one, and then you take deterministic approach. So let me put it like this. If you want to reduce the cost of test generation, it should be two-phase approach. First of all, you should have a low-cost method, so many faults can be detected with little efforts. Use random vectors and fault simulation. So initially, it will give you very high coverage very fast. Like a soldier with machine gun kills enemy randomly and fast. So many are killed. But then few are very resistant. They will not be killed. So for them, you will have to kill them with proper shooting. So then you will use the pistol and take the specific goal and then you shoot them. So in industry-based automatic test pattern generation, both the approaches are used. First, they use random test pattern generation, and once the random test pattern generation does not become stagnant, they change it to deterministic test pattern generation. Now coming to DFT, again everything comes in DFT itself, but DFT has some advantages and disadvantages. Now when you know that your circuit is not that much testable, your circuit is having some stubborn faults which are never going to be covered easily with ATPG, you will have to add extra hardware. So DFT is adding extra hardware to make your circuit easily testable. Now, if you are putting, suppose you have a specific design, you have an adder. So that is the adder hardware, which is your design hardware. Now, to check that adder, you are putting some extra gates, you are extra interconnects, extra hardware. That is called DFT, design for test. Extra design, extra hardware to make testing easy. So DFT doesn't give you specific functionality. कि इतना DFT है तो मेरा adder के साथ अब multiplier भी है. No. So it is only just for testing ease. So that hardware never comes into picture while your actual functional list is there. So what are the advantages of DFT? It increases the fault coverage. It reduces test generation time. By adding DFT, whatever your test generation time, your ATPG timing, you can reduce them. Now you can easily find out which are the test vectors for a given circuit. You can even reduce the test vector numbers. So your test length and your test time will be reduced. If you can reduce the number of test vectors, naturally your memory requirement to store your test vectors will be less. Sometimes it supports test hierarchy as well and concurrent engineering also being supported. But while you are adding extra DFT, your area overhead is being decreased. You have extra area now. Your extra pin is also required. Your performance is going to be degraded. As you increase the area, naturally your power will be increased and your speed will be decreased. Your design time will be also increased. So when DFT gives you so many advantages, it has its own drawbacks as well, because there is no free lunch. There are two kinds of DFT methods, digital DFT and then analog and mixed signal DFT. In today's talk, I am going to discuss about ad hoc methods and structured methods. Ad hoc methods are, I can give you one example of ad hoc method. Suppose I have this particular circuit. Now here, if I want to test this circuit, in an exhaustive method, how many test vectors I require? I want answer from you people now.
2 to the power of 8.
Yes, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2 raised to power of 8. Sorry, 2 raised to 8. So this is very right answer. So that is exhaustive testing. Now, if I say a pseudo-exhaustive testing, then in pseudo-exhaustive testing, I will divide my circuit into two parts, two sub-circuit. So I have this Z1 circuit, and then I have this Z2 circuit. So sorry. So I will test Z1 and then Z2. So earlier I had 2 raised to 8. Now that was my exhaustive number. Now if I do pseudo exhaustive, then what it will be? For Z1 I will require, can anyone tell me Z for Z1? Hello?
2 raised to 4.
2 raised to 5 because A, B, C, D, E. Z1 is made up of 2 raised to 5 plus Z2. So it is C, D, E, F, G, H. So 2 raised to 6. So can I reduce the number of test vector by pseudo exhaustive?
Yes.
So here
Yes.
it was 256. And यहाँ पे कितने हो रहे हैं?
52 plus 64.
98.
98. So from exhaustive,
96.
if I have gone to pseudo hello?
96.
So I could, yeah. So whatever it may be, but I could reduce it from compared to exhaustive. So that is now established. Still, I want to reduce from 98. Then I see how I can do it and how can I add DFT. That example I am giving you here. Okay. So if I erase now everything here. I want to test this circuitry in 3 parts now. This red part is alpha, this blue part is beta, and this green part. If I, rather than Z1, first I did a complete circuit, then I did output wise, that was pseudo exhaustive Z1 and Z2. Now I want to do it in parts like alpha, beta, gamma. So if I am taking alpha separately, then it is 2 raised to 2, then beta, 2 raised to 3, and again one more time, 2 raised to 3 for green gamma. So if I want to do this, I will have to make sure that then how alpha, beta, and gamma can be separately testable. So if I want to check this alpha part, this part only here, what I will have to insert here at this particular input? 0. So if I apply 0 here, and then whatever AB I apply here, 2 raised to 2, and if the output comes here accordingly, I am done with alpha part. Do you people agree with this? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Now, similarly, if I can insert 1 here, if I can insert 1 here, and then with 2 raised to 3 of FGH, my gamma part is being checked at Z2. See, first of all, I am asking what is the requirement. Then I will say how to complete that requirement. So, my first requirement is to have the OR gate input here 0 so that alpha can be accessible at Z1. My second requirement is if I can make AND gate input 1 here, then this particular gamma is being detected at Z2 and FGH will be fine with that. Now, if I want to check beta, I can check it either at Z1 or at Z2. If I want to make beta takeable at Z1, then this should be 0. And if I want to check beta at Z2, then this should be 1. So if I can insert some kind of hardware which allows me to insert zeros and one at end and gate, then definitely I can complete this task with 2 raised to 2, 2 raised to 3, and 2 raised to 3. So now compared to earlier part, now 8 plus 8 so only 20 test vectors will be enough to make this design testable. Could I establish the requirement? I think someone has unmute. Please mute yourself. Please mute yourself. मतलब सर आपको म्यूट कर सकते हैं क्या? Okay, so now how to do it? Let's talk about this. Let me go to next slide. So see how I have done it. I have inserted two multiplexers here. So this multiplexer and this multiplexers allows me to insert whatever value I want to insert here. So I said that if I want to check alpha, then what I will do, I will make selection line 1. So this red line is being selected and input I will put 0. So this 0 will now be given here and then I can check alpha. Now if I put selection line if I now let me talk about gamma. If I want to check gamma, then again I select the selection line 1 and I put 1 here as input I. So this one goes here to this NAND gate and this gamma can be checked at Z2. Now if I want to check this beta portion here, then this beta portion I have put one more interconnect here, and if I put selection line 0, so that beta portion goes to Z2 now, and I can check this beta here. So by putting two multiplexers, one selection line and one input extra input, I could make this test design testable with less number of test vectors compared to 256 and 98 and all these things. Now only 20 test vectors will require to make this design testable, and that is what DFT. So this red is extra hardware which was not required earlier in my original design, but I have inserted this extra hardware to make this design testable with less number of test vectors. And if I have less number of test vectors, naturally less test time, less test cost, and overall less production price. So this is how I could give you a demo of DFT. Now, my last slide is about BIST architecture, built-in self-test. So built-in self-test is also one kind of DFT where you will have with your circuit, you will have test generation also inbuilt. So you will have one hardware fabricated for test generation. You will be generating all test vectors one by one internally. You can put a counter there, you can put a LFSR there, you can put a memory and memory controller there. So one by one they will provide test vectors to your circuit under test. Now, once your circuit under test is generating the actual output, those actual responses will be verified with the stored responses, and that's called a response verification. And overall, you will have to fabricate the test controller also. So this was your original circuitry. Now to make this circuitry self-testable, built-in testable, you are putting all these components extra. So these are also a part of DFT, which we call built-in self-test. So again, going with BIST architecture. So this is your original circuit under test. Now you will have hardware pattern generator, which will generate the hardware patterns, and through this input mux. So this input mux will help you to put your circuit in normal function or testing. So by this test controller, suppose that this test controller gives a normal signal, then your original primary input will go to circuit. And if you put it in a test mode, so then your hardware generated patterns will be given to this circuit. Now this circuit will generate the primary outputs, and those primary outputs will be compared with the, so this is the response comparator, compactor, and this compacted output will be compared with the golden outputs which are stored in this memory. And if all the outputs are being compared and they are same, then it will be declared as a good chip. So this is the BIST architecture in general. So with this, I am ending my discussion. Now the session is free for question answer.
Yes, any questions from the participant? You can ask by unmute your mic and you can ask the questions.
So I think I could complete it in time because last few minutes
Yes.
I wanted for questions.
Yes, madam. So any questions from participant? If you have any question, you can unmute and you can ask.
So further also I am writing my mail ID here. In any time you question, you can put a mail and we can discuss.
Thank you, madam. Madam, I have attended your 3 sessions on this topic at Marwadi as well as at the Nirma in last November in training as well as today. Every time I got something new, right? And madam, I have one question. If you can guide us the research topic in this DFT, if you can suggest. Sorry, you can say.
Yes. So see nowadays basically all the research for DFT and testing is how you can reduce the test time, because that is the major. So test time, if you can reduce, naturally test cost will be reduced. And there are different approaches. Myself had done in test data compression. But now we people are looking about how this artificial intelligence and machine learning can be used to reduce the test time. So that is the most recent research avenue I am looking forward, and I am insisting my PhD student also to check the possibilities that how efficiently we can use this AI ML for because see basically machine learning will tell you how the next generated test vector should be, so that it will cover more and more faults. So this is a very promising area I am looking forward. Mr. Dr. Suresh has asked the scope for test engineer in India. Dr. Suresh, let me tell you that I am heading postgraduate MTech VLSI course here in Nirma University. I am involved with them with 2003. Earlier we had 36 students strength and now we have 18 students. And from 2003 onwards, all my students, if I say that 80% of the students are working in verification and test domain. They are at Intel, they are at Qualcomm, they are at ARM, you name it, at the Broadcom, they are at Synopsys, they are at, I think, Xilinx, any VLSI company, you name it, and our students are there. And let me tell you, 80% of the students nearly are in validation, verification, and testing. So not at India level, the test engineers have a very, very huge scope at overall. So you just Google the scope for verification and testing engineer in VLSI, and you will find even you go just be on LinkedIn or you check that how many vacancies are coming in the verification and validation field, and you will surprised that there's a huge scope. Aparao is saying thank you, madam, for an informative lecture. So it was my pleasure. Mr. Somit Kumar is how could AI ML be linked with VLSI research area? Is there any specific research topic you would like to suggest? No, I will not say directly any specific topic. See, it's a research is not that key directly you will get it and you will do it. It's a iterative process. So you first of all you study that how you can which are the available topics for test time reduction. It can be efficient test generation methods. It can be test data compression. It can be efficient DFT insertion, and then in that efficiency, how your AI/ML can help that you. So not a direct topic, but I would say you search on reduction of test time using AI/ML.
Yes, any more? If you any questions?
Ma'am, hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
How BEAST is used for testing? Like whether online or offline BEAST? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. See, online and offline based. See, built-in self-tester. Suppose I'm giving you the simple example. Whenever you switch on your laptop, first of all, it goes on self-checking mode. Okay. So that is offline based. It offline based. The circuit puts itself in a testing mode, and that time the overall normal functionality is being put on hold. So normal functionality is being stopped, and for a short time circuit is testing itself, and once the testing found okay, circuit again resumes its functionality. So this is offline based. But online based is ki parallel to ongoing functionality, circuit keeps on testing itself in parallel. Suppose it's a mission critical applications, maybe it's a space or aviation or some radiation effective or any medical circuitry. There, it is not possible that key circuit puts itself in hold for some seconds and then again resumes the functionality back. So there, the circuit's functionality can never be stopped. And in that case, it will be online based. So somehow you will have to control the circuitry in such that without harming the ongoing functionality, the BEAST should confirm that yes, circuit is working fine. Thank you, Dr. Suresh Kumar, for appreciating my presentation. And yes, Mrs. Radhamani, I will send my presentation to Hasmukh sir, and then he can distribute it to all. All my work is for all of you only.
Madam, our principal sir is also in meeting.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Musa madam. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm happy to see you again.
Actually, I was having one lecture, so actually I left in between.
After a long time we are meeting.
But without your permission, I think we have recorded your meeting, right? I think, Koringa sir, we have to give the recording to AICT, right? So we have recorded madam's lecture.
No,
I will listen it again because it was very interesting session, actually. I find it very useful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for appreciation.
Thank you, madam. Again, you have spared your precious time with us, and you have shared your expertise with us, and on behalf of all the participants and behalf of Government Engineering College Rajkot and its department, I again thank you. Thank you, madam, and thank you, sir.
Thank you all. My special thanks to all of you, Vitlani sir, Hasmukh sir, and the team at GEC. Thank you all.
I can see that participants are also enthusiastic. Some question answers are going on. That shows that they are very much interested in all the sessions, taking active part in the session.
Yeah. I am seeing here that all the participants are very active. They keep on asking questions, and that shows that they are very enthusiastic. They are not doing this course just for getting the certificate.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah. So it's good.
Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you. So with your permission, now may I leave the meeting?
Okay, madam.
Let me end.
Thank you. I will send my slides to you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Okay, friends. So let me end our this meeting here, and we'll again meet at